It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us to talk about a great resource that I feel like we could all use a little help in the area of prayer. This is the 5 Habits of Prayerful People. Thanks for joining us, Michael St Pierre.
Thanks for having me. It's a treat.
How do you feel about alliteration?
Well, I'm kind of a big fan of it based on the book, you can imagine. I think it's an easy way to remember things, and we have so much input in our lives that it seems like you have to alliterate if you're going to be an author these days.
Well, and judging by the cover, you might not get it too much, the 5 Habits of Prayerful People, but your 5 habits are passion and pursuit, presence, preparation and planning, persistence and perseverance, pondering. So you got the P's covered.
Yeah, we've got the P's covered, and actually the working title of the book was In Pursuit of Prayer. It just didn't make the final cut, but okay. I guess I am sort of addicted to alliteration.
Well, good. Oh, do you have a daily prayer routine?
I do, yeah. And, basically, I have 4 kids, so it's not as if every day is exactly the same.
I'm in the same boat there. Yep.
Yeah. So with that said, I do try to start my day in a certain way and even end the day in a certain way. I'll wake up at typically 5:30, take the dog out, brew some coffee, and then from there, I will go down to my office where I've got a nice little, not a chapel, but I have a corner, kind of a prayer corner, and I will read the daily mass readings of the day and do some journaling, and then force myself to shut up and not say anything and just sit, in silence for 5 minutes. And if I can do that, that's probably a good start to the day. And all said and done, that's probably, I would say, half hour, depending on the day.
And when did this routine start?
Yeah, good question. Well, it certainly looked different in different seasons of life. When I was in college, there's a lot more time, no kids or family or anything. So I was able to pray for a long time in college, and I could do an hour at a time and that sort of thing. It seems like today the time is a little bit more scarce. But I would say that just having a morning routine of prayer, I've probably been doing it for 15 years or so. And journaling, I used to do paper journals. Now I use an app called Day One on my iPad, and I never go back and reread stuff. It's purely selfish. It's really just to get stuff out of my head, and then hopefully God, receives it as a prayer.
Yeah, that idea of praying for an hour in college probably isn't the typical college experience. So, what do you think motivated you, or encouraged you, or challenged you to be dedicated to prayer when you were in college?
Yeah, it was totally pure pressure.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I went to Catholic University of America, and I just had some incredible friends, real influences who, just encouraged me to get in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and people who they made it okay to spend time alone with the Lord. And I don't want to say it became cool to do that, but I think it was just an environment where that was perfectly accepted. And it seemed like there were a lot of circles I was traveling in, that people were doing that. And plus, there's a lot of chapels around, so not difficult to find a quiet space. I will say this too, Kyle. I am an introvert, pretty strong one. So for me, it is perhaps, by DNA, a little bit easier to kind of sit quietly. I certainly do have to work at it, but, in God's sense of humor and providence, I married an extrovert. And so for my wife, it is not that easy to just sit in quiet. And so, I appreciate so much. Actually, I admire extroverts all the more who can have a daily prayer time, because it's probably harder for them. So, I don't want to say, gee, I have a leg up on people, but I do acknowledge that it might be a little bit easier for me just by nature and how God wired me to have a daily quiet time.
Sure. And how did studying productivity help you grow in your prayer life, or your understanding of prayer life, or putting new things into practice?
Good question. So, yeah, before this book came out, I actually had been writing and blogging, publishing articles about personal productivity for at least a decade. And I was just really intrigued by it. I mean, I can remember as a high school student having a daily planner. I mean, I was one of those total geeks that when the Franklin Covey catalog would come out, I mean, this is like, I mean, can you believe they had catalogs for planners? I mean, I couldn't get enough of that, and the chance to order new pages was just exhilarating, So I've always just been really interested in that sort of stuff and an early adopter. I mean, if it's shiny and black and has an Apple logo on it, I mean, I want it. And so I've always been really intrigued by just kind of smarter ways to do things and try whether to save time or cut down on stress. I mean, when I was a president of a Catholic high school, I used to make my staff read David Allen's Getting Things Done, and we'd always have books and things we were trying to get better at, and we were trying Slack, and we were trying project management apps and that sort of thing. And some of it worked and some of it didn't, but the point was just keep trying to get better. I think it's Peter Senge talks in the book, The Fifth Discipline, about a learning organization. You got to get smarter in terms of your organization. So I just thought, wow, what if I could start applying some of these life hacks to my own prayer life as kind of like a living experiment or laboratory? So it's been really fun, and having a spiritual director to kind of report back on these different experiments has really made a big difference for me.
We're talking with Michael St Pierre. The book is The 5 Habits of Prayerful People, a no excuses guide to strengthening your relationship with God. And what would you say is the first step that we need to focus on with prayer?
Yeah, I would say the first step is, I talk about it in the first habit, it's the habit of passion and pursuit. And it's this idea, I'll tell you what it is, Kyle. It's not this idea of work harder, just like close your eyes tighter, or have better posture when you're kneeling in front of the Blessed Sacrament. It's not that. It's really an acknowledgement that our prayer is actually a response. It's a reaction to God's pursuit that's already been taking place in our lives. And so, really prayer is a realization that I've already been loved. I've already been made with a purpose and a design and a plan from God Almighty. And now I'm opening my eyes to this. And daily I have the chance to look around and see the incredible people God's put in my life and the opportunities and blessings and struggles and challenges. So I think that's the first thing, is just to acknowledge that God can't love you any more or any less. Even when we're in heaven, He's not going to love us anymore. He is absolutely, madly, crazily, recklessly in love with us now. And there's nothing we can do that could change that love of God for us. And so prayer, in a sense, the pressure's off when it comes to prayer. It's not like God needs us to, utter a more perfect prayer. I talk about in the book that a good prayer is an honest prayer. And so if you're feeling like your day really stinks, to talk to God about that. I believe, and I think from doing the research for the book, the saints confirm this, that God wants us to be raw and honest and vulnerable with Him. And He is not stupid. He knows when we're having a sucky day. So why try to, put this air of perfection on when God knows that we're broken and we have vulnerabilities and foibles and all the rest. So I would just say that's the first thing, is just don't beat yourself up, take some of the pressure off, and just realize that whatever expression our prayer takes, it's a response to God's already happening pursuit of us.
So the passion that you mentioned, is that something that we either have or don't have, or is that something that can be fostered and cultivated?
Yeah, very much the latter. So, I kind of liken it to when you walk into a Catholic church and you genuflect. I don't know about you, but for me, I rarely find that moment inspiring. It's not like, with each genuflection, I am just taken up and I am levitating and I am just, there's this angelic look on my face. It's more that I am acting so as to improve my belief And most of the time, I don't feel anything. Most of the time, it's a simple act. There is real faith in that, pure faith in that. Even like when we make the sign of the cross, most of us just kind of rush through it. We do the NASCAR version, probably looks like we're knocking off flies,
right.
But there is something very powerful about these physical gestures which remind us of the belief, the seeds of belief that we already have. And then over time, sometimes we have to act in order to believe. And, I don't think we can wait to have kind of this perfect, pure faith, and then we'll become great at praying. I think we have to pray ourselves into believing more deeply. So I think that's one of the good news stories of this book is you can get better at this. It costs nothing, and each one of us can become an expert in prayer.
Does it cost time?
Oh, no question. Okay. I mean, it's kind of like physical fitness. Nobody who is physically fit just wings it. When we're young, we can do that. But eventually, we all do have to buckle down on diet, or on actually moving our bodies, or actually trying to get stronger, more physically fit. And I think that typically the goal is you want to do physically fit things, and you want to have kind of a mindset of being healthy. And I think in terms of prayer, it's a mindset of prayerfulness, but also there does have to be a certain component of, okay, I have a morning routine, or I have an evening routine, or I don't do certain things on certain days of the week. One of the experiments I talk about is on Sundays trying to practice a digital Sabbath. And this is very difficult for me as a technology addict and nerd. I acknowledge that. And I think it's probably pretty difficult for a lot of people. But wow, that is effective, So I do think there is a cost of time, and there is some sacrifice involved to all this. I mean, Mother Teresa talks a lot about God being the friend of silence. Well, that's about a sacrifice of visual and noise stimulation. So, no question. There are time components to praying. Absolutely.
The fifth habit is pondering. What do you mean by pondering?
Yeah, so I think a reflective muscle is at the backbone of a prayerful life. The Jesuits would call it an examination of conscience, or a daily examine. This idea of looking back over the day to see, where did I see God? God's with us all throughout the day, but where did I notice him in particular? Or where did I miss him? I was really short in a conversation, or I was overly blunt, or I was just clueless, or I hurt somebody's feelings or whatever. I missed God in those moments. That's on me. And I think the other way we can be more pondering besides this kind of daily examine is through spiritual direction, getting somebody, it's like going to the dentist, none of us like going to the dentist, but boy, it's really valuable. We typically floss the heck out of our teeth the week before. There's something good about that. Would you like to floss every day? Of course, but some of us just don't do that. And I think spiritual direction is one of those things that I don't know anybody who just loves going to see their spiritual director, but over time, it is a relationship that we cultivate that can help us be more reflective. And they ask questions that we just ordinarily wouldn't think of. And then, of course, you could take it even further, whether it's a quarterly offsite or an annual retreat or a once every 5-year sabbatical. So I think there are ways to do this. Most of them cost nothing, again, with the exception of time. And it's just a matter of making an appointment for yourself with God.
All right. Well, there's so much more that we could get into, but we are running out of time. So where should we send people to get a copy of the book?
Sure. You can go to Amazon, of course. I'm sure that's the only bookstore on the planet at this point. And
there.
So you can certainly do that, or you can go to my website, mikestpierre.com/book.
Again, it's called The 5 Habits of Prayerful People, a no excuses guide to strengthening your relationship with God. Thank you so much, Michael, for challenging us in our prayer. I can't imagine anybody that would not benefit from this book. I think we could all grow in our prayer life, and any kind of tips and tricks to improve that would be a great help. So thanks for sharing this with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.